wait for you to finish your guitar.
Hello, and welcome to The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. I am Phil Rood. I'm the dad.
I'm Austin Rood. I'm the son. Every week we watch a movie and then we talk about it.
And this week we went on a road trip, running for our lives.
We did, yeah.
Oh, man. But we'll talk about that a little bit later.
When we're not in witness protection.
That's right. Boy, if only there had been witness protection at the time of this movie. What's new? What's going
on? Honestly, not much. It's been a week. Pretty basic week.
Just a pretty basic week. More Doctor Who.
Yep, WandaVision ended.
Yeah, I heard.
That was something.
I heard mixed reactions.
Well, you know, people came up with crazy theories and then none of it was as cool as that, so...
You know, I think almost all of the criticism that I heard about it was just on... They didn't like the way some of the characters played out. Everybody has basically said, I enjoyed the show regardless, but I hope they address this. I hope they address this. This wasn't perfect, but I've really heard nothing but positive things about the show.
It's a good show. I'm gonna spoil just a tiny bit because I want to talk about how ridiculous it is.
Spoiler alert for people who care.
So if you want to move on, no, they introduce Evan Peters as Quicksilver, and it's this thing of like, oh, is he the Fox Quicksilver? Is this the multiverse? And then they just reveal that this is Evan Peters playing a totally different character, and he has nothing to do with Quicksilver. It's just this weird cop-out that was like clearly trying to tease fans, and then it's like backing out in the worst way.
This sounds like part of the issue that I have with all of this stuff, and just people following studios and contracts and who owns the rights to what character, and then they merge, and then they're like, well, which character is, and it's like there's almost too much outside of the actual story being told that people know too much about things.
Right, it's like a meta thing. If you didn't understand any of the Marvel history, you wouldn't get that this is like a big deal, and then it's like, it's nothing.
It almost sounds like they're trying to address it in some way, but it's also just kind of weird. I don't know.
It was a cheap shot. So, but other than that, I think the show is good.
The other criticism I have heard, and I'm going to say this just as a plug for this one account, is that Elizabeth Olsen.
Right.
Her character is Jewish or comes from a part of the world that is predominantly Jewish, and that she is not, and that some part of her character plays into the cultural history of where she comes from.
Right. She's Romanian.
Yeah. You've seen her on TikTok, the rabbi who reads comics.
Yes.
And gives Jewish, this is not my shout out, but I'm putting an extra one in here because I love this account, honestly.
It's awesome.
I think she's great. She basically talks about comics history and Jewish comic creators, Jewish comic people like The Thing who have in the last 30 years been canonized as being Jewish. And the metaphor for... Like, I'll just use The Thing, for example. Like, The Thing is basically the Golem from Jewish folklore, which I never had put all that together. I didn't know he was a Jewish character.
I didn't know that a lot of the major comic book players were Jewish creators.
Like Jack Kirby, Stan Lee. It's...
that was cool to find out. And then to find out that, like, there are these little traits of, like, Peter Parker could be Jewish, right? And all this stuff.
Yeah, she has. It's a great account. I think it's. I'll put this one in the notes too. It's I think at Rabbi Comics, something like that on TikTok. She's just wonderful, and I think she has a great view of comics history. But she did say it is kind of disappointing that they went into Wanda's backstory and her cultural heritage, but they didn't hire if that's going to be a factor in the story, then maybe this is who we should have playing it. And I know this is a highly debated topic and who can play what roles, but I thought she had some kind of interesting, well thought out criticisms.
It's interesting to find out that this character in the comics has this cultural past.
Right.
And in the MCU, they made it like this fictional Middle Eastern country.
Yeah, it's like Latveria kind of thing with like Doctor Doom has the same kind of weird, non-real country.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like, we don't want to offend any real people, so we'll just invent a country
but then they come back around to a real cultural history. Anyway, it's kind of interesting. I'm not weighing in either way.
It's a weird character change, and they did it a while ago, but it kind of comes to prominence in her solo
in
thing.
What's going on now.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
But it's over, so move on, people.
It's over? Is there going to be another season, or is it over?
I think it's going to be a mini thing. It leads into Doctor Strange.
Oh, cool.
I'm sure they'll have, like, a Scarlet Witch movie, or...
Yeah.
Maybe they will do, like, 3 seasons.
Oh, I like the idea of, like, a mini-series. Let's do some mini-series and just get in, get out, move on, instead of beating these things to death.
Dad, there is more money to make.
I know.
You keep thinking about the story as if that's what matters.
One thing I know that, speaking of beating it to death, because they keep reviving this, trying to milk money out of it, but we watched a little bit of the old one yesterday, The Muppet Show on Disney+.
That's right. I watched The Muppet Show. You just happened to be in the room.
I came in. I caught the end of what you guys were watching, but yeah, it's good to see that on there, and keep finding out. Yeah, they keep rebooting The Muppet Show.
There's a Disney Plus one.
Keep trying to kick it back around again, and
I looked. It didn't feel. I only watched the trailer, but it didn't feel like the same whimsical as the pilot of the original show that I had just watched. But it was interesting to see, like, they had RuPaul was a guest on there. I was like, what?
RuPaul I can see kind of fitting into the world of the Muppets pretty well.
Yeah.
Loud,
dressed weird.
Very strange oddity but somehow charming.
I think RuPaul is a Muppet.
RuPaul may be a Muppet, yeah.
Just came to life. Pinocchio situation.
That really could be. Anyway. None of that is what we watched for this week.
Nope, just us getting off track.
Just us, that's how we start the show.
Yeah.
This week, we watched the 2002 crime drama Road to Perdition, in which a mob enforcer's son witnesses a murder, forcing them to go on the run and down a path of revenge and redemption. This movie stars Tom Hanks, Tyler Hoechlin, Paul Newman, Daniel Craig, Stanley Tucci, Jude Law, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. It is directed by Sam Mendes and written by David Self, based on a graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner.
Lots of people.
A great cast. This cast is amazing. I'm always blown away when I watch this. I'm like, this is one of those movies that just puts together all of these, huge actors. Not just like huge names like Stanley Tucci. I mean, that guy is incredible. He plays Frank Needy, the boss he goes to see in Chicago.
Right, yeah.
And you probably know Stanley Tucci as he's like a talk show host in the Hunger Games.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You have seen Stanley Tucci is that guy that looks like a regular guy, so you don't realize you've seen him in 100 million things.
That happens a lot, especially when you don't pay attention to who plays what.
Yeah, but he's just so good in, like, everything.
Can I say something controversial?
Yes.
I don't think Tom Hanks should have been in this movie.
Ooh. I don't think that's controversial to say.
I think it's a bad casting choice.
Why do you think that?
Because he doesn't play this part well.
Really?
I don't think so.
I disagree with you, but I remember when this movie came out, when it was before it came out, and it was kind of announced, maybe the first trailers were coming out, people were losing their minds. They're like, Tom Hanks can't play a bad guy. Because he was just, the line was not that he was the hero of this movie or the antagonist of this movie, that he was playing a bad guy. Which,
right.
He is a bad person.
A horrible person.
But he is also sort of the driver of this movie.
They're trying to do a complex...
He's an anti-hero.
Gray morals thing.
I don't think it's a gray morals thing. I think Tom Hanks knows he's a bad person in this movie. Like
but he's doing a few good things, so it's kind of like...
Yes, he's trying to save his son, and save his son's soul, essentially. But yeah, this is not a role we're used to seeing Tom Hanks play.
I don't think he does the bad stuff well, though. Like, he does the, father-son moments well, but I feel like the standoffs and all that, I don't buy it.
I don't know. I do buy it, because I think a lot of it, the way it plays out is just regular action, and I think he does that well enough. Like the shootouts kind of thing.
Yeah.
When he's robbing banks, he's kind of just sort of matter-of-factly telling them, like, yes, my name's Mike Sullivan. Yes, I'm taking the mob's money. Tell them it was me.
Yeah.
He does play angry well enough, like when he gets mad at Daniel Craig for murdering the guy.
Yeah.
And I think the rest of the time you're seeing, I think this character can't just be like a bad dude, like a mean, evil person. I think he has to have some nuance to him, like when he shoots Paul Newman at the end of the movie. He shoots his father figure.
Yeah.
He has to look sad. He can't just be an angry guy murdering somebody. He has to look sad about it. And that's where I think Tom Hanks is able to pull this role off.
Here's my problem with this movie. I don't feel sympathy for anyone other than the boy in this movie. Everyone else here has dug their own grave. I do not care about them. They're all evil people.
They are all evil people.
This is my problem. I don't like mob movies because there's no one to root for, usually. Like, the point usually is, wow, all these people suck. And it's like, yeah, why waste 2 hours of my life watching you tell me that when I could just not interact with the mafia or mobsters?
Yeah, I don't know. That is certainly, I think, a viewpoint that's become more of a mainstream way of thinking about mob movies and movies about bad people. Is people say, yeah, I don't want to watch this. These are bad people. I think a good mob movie portrays bad people in an interesting way. And I think there is a section of audience, and I will straight up include myself in this, who likes to live vicariously through watching bad people do bad things. I can't live this way. It's kind of fun to watch. I mean, not this this movie is more tragic, but something like Goodfellas. Watching Goodfellas, that is a fun movie. You're watching a movie about these despicable people doing terrible things, but you're watching it through this sort of entertaining character. They're never like portrayed as heroes, but it's just sort of like matter of factly, this is my life and it's a colorful life. And look at me, I'm living large. And isn't this fun? We're just taking whatever we want. Don't we all wish we could do this? And there's something really fun about that. And I mean, you can get into like the idea of like the shadow self. Everybody has a shadow self. And maybe this is how I indulge my shadow self, is saying, wouldn't that be fun? No, I don't want to actually live like this, but it looks kind of fun. And I think there's something to that. I don't see that in this movie. I understand what you're saying about this movie, but I do see something redeemable about Tom Hanks's character in this. He explains when his son finds out what he does, exactly what he does. You know what I mean? Like, there's a weird shady stuff at the beginning, which I really like, you know, where he's like, my dad does something questionable, you know.
It's definitely off.
He carries rosary beads and a gun. Like, there's something, there's a weird, and I think that helps. There's like a layer of Catholicism on this thing that gives some depth to these people. Like, yes, they are worried about their souls. Yes, they believe in God. Yes, they know they're sinning. But they do it anyway. And there's something kind of compelling about that.
I don't buy it. It seems just completely illogical.
It is illogical. It's absolutely illogical.
So why do you want to interact with that? I don't get it.
I think there's something very redeemable about the Tom Hanks character in this. He tells his son, he goes, when your mom and I had nothing, Mr. Rooney gave us a home and he gave us a life and he's allowed us to raise our family in relative comfort. Remember, this is during the Great Depression when a lot of people were out of work. I'm not justifying what he does. I'm saying I think he's a character who is very good at killing people. Maybe he doesn't necessarily enjoy it, but this is something he feels indebted. You kind of get the sense that Rooney is like his father figure. Maybe he didn't have a dad at all, or he had a bad dad. This is somebody who actually looked out for him, and he feels indebted to him until he turns on him.
Right. He is okay with murder until it affects his life.
Right. Yeah.
That is so selfish.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. This guy's a dick.
You don't think it's redeemable, though, that he's not trying to redeem himself by the end of the movie. He's trying to save his son. He's trying to save his child. He actually goes in deeper at the end to the bad stuff in order to save his son.
Sure.
You don't think that's a admirable? I'm not saying he's an admirable person.
You know, at least you didn't screw up your son.
That's what this movie's about, is breaking the cycle.
Right. Alternatively, don't get in the cycle to begin with.
Well, that's easy to say. I'm not talking about mobs and murderers, but real life people get caught in the cycle. There's a cycle of poverty. There's a cycle of abuse. There's a cycle, like these things are hard to break out of when it's all you know.
I know. There's a level of realism to the violence in this movie and why people do what they do. I don't want to watch it. I don't care about it. I was bored for this movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Here's my thing, okay? Like, beautiful, great, well-executed movie. I could not care less. Show me something else. Like, that's just
interesting. So you can't watch a movie no, that's not fair. Because I was going to say you can't watch a movie where you don't identify with the characters. But you didn't even find your way to sympathizing with, like, Michael Jr.
No, that's the only character that I cared about in this movie.
Well, he's the POV character. You couldn't go along for the ride of the story he's telling you?
I for the first half of this movie, which is very slow, by the way, and it takes a while, but, like, I think when they get to the diner, I think that's when I started getting invested. When he had, like, the photographer, like, interrogating him. Yeah. That was when it started to get interesting, which is also when it started to get stylized. So I feel like the beginning wasn't very...
it was set where it was set. It was set very much in the... I don't want to say it wasn't stylized at all. It was more grounded. Set dressing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably fair. But I think most of this was grounded in just the set dressing. There was a little more grit to it when they start showing McGuire, the Jude Law character, as, like going into crime scenes and things like that, and just the real dirty kind of underside of this business.
But it doesn't show it as dirty. It plays like happy music, and it's artful, and we have this shot, like...
I wouldn't say it's discordant music. I wouldn't say it was happy music. It's sort of...
it's playful.
Bizarre carnival music. Part of this movie, I think, plays like a horror movie.
It does.
I got some real strong horror vibes at a few different scenes. And I think that was one of them, when they kind of introduce him. And there's that weird... It's almost like accordion music. Mm-hmm. It's just... kind of stumbling off key and just it's a bizarre element of this movie.
I like it though.
I like it a lot. Yeah. I'm not you're tearing it down. I'm building it up a little bit.
Well, that's
more.
the thing. I'm trying to pinpoint what about this movie I didn't like, and I can't do it. Cuz it's not like
maybe you secretly like this movie.
I don't like this movie.
No, I can't believe you don't like this movie.
I'm sorry. It wasn't entertaining.
I really think this is a beautiful movie. I think Sam Mendes is a great director. And I didn't realize until I watched it today, this is probably the first time he and Daniel Craig worked together, because Sam Mendes did the last two James Bond movies. And this is way prior to Daniel Craig becoming James Bond. This is probably like 10 years before.
Yeah. There's a weird, like, creative team here, because I noticed the music guy.
Let's stay on it, yeah.
Yeah, he has a brother or someone who shares the same last name as him in the cast of the movie, and also he's written music for other movies such as A Series of Unfortunate Events and Spyfall, which connects him to Daniel Craig.
Skyfall, not Spyfall.
Right, Skyfall. Yeah. Spyfall's a Doctor Who.
And that connects him to Sam Mendes as well.
Right. That's Thomas Newman.
Okay.
So there's a Newman in the... There was someone in the credits.
It could be. I mean, Newman's not a horribly...
Right, Paul Newman.
Oh, Paul Newman.
Yeah, who's that?
That's Rooney. That's the old man.
Okay.
I don't know if I don't know if they're related or not.
Maybe they're not. I just made that connection.
Paul Newman is like a huge icon of film. He was in The Sting. He was in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Cool Hand Luke. Paul Newman is just huge, and I think you would probably know him from Pixar Cars. He's the old car.
Oh, I know who. Yeah, he's one of the cars in this movie.
Yes, exactly like that. Which series of unfortunate events?
It's the movie with
the Jim Carrey one.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he did the music. It's very similar. Which might be why I thought some of these, like, oh, this is a cheery scene, because in a very melancholy story, like Series of Unfortunate Events, they play not exactly happy music, but it's a happy scene.
Right. It's a this guy Wall-E, Thomas Newman. I'm looking at what he's
right. He's got a bunch of
1917, The Help, Skyfall, You Were Never Really There, The Newsroom on HBO. This guy's done a bunch of stuff. I am so bad at picking out like composers and stuff like that. I know people who watch movies, I follow directors, I follow some writers, I follow actors. I know people who follow composers like that and collect film scores, and with a few exceptions, I cannot pick out who's who. And I really admire like an ear like you've got, where you can As much as I love music, I cannot pick. I love music. I love movies. I cannot pick film composers out. No.
See, I don't normally. Weird things stand out to me. So, like, I'll notice similarities between, like, oh, this feels like this movie, and then I figure out, oh, it's the music, or oh, it's the cinematography.
It's pretty good. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll dissect what I liked about this movie, what you didn't like about this movie, and vice versa. We'll take a look at maybe some parts that you did like, and maybe I didn't like as much. So
we'll find common ground.
I'm sure we will.
Or we won't.
Or will we? And we are back.
Yes, we are.
How was your break?
It was good.
Did you learn to drive?
I still do not know how to drive.
No, man.
This 12-year-old has me beat. Not cool.
One of the best scenes in this movie, I think. I think that is so much fun. The learning to drive scene.
Yeah, I was the only fun in this movie.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna say this is a fun movie. This isn't like a big action movie or some popcorn movie or a comedy. I will say I have read the graphic novel that this is based on.
How does it hold up?
I like this movie a lot better, actually. And I think the graphic novel is beautifully drawn. And I think the bones of the story are there. And they're good, and the themes are pretty spot on. The big differences, like the photographer, McGuire, he's not in the book. It's more like just endless henchmen. It's an action story. The movie is, I think, a drama with some action scenes, and the graphic novel is basically an action story with a few dramatic scenes.
That's okay. So that's interesting because I feel like
you might actually enjoy it more because it's just a straight up like kind of shoot 'em up kind of thing.
I like drama though, but like okay, so this movie is kind of a drama, kind of action, but I don't like the action because it's not fun, and I don't like the drama because it's weighed down by me not caring about the characters.
It's fair. If you don't care about the characters, I'm not going to be able to convince you that, like, this is an interesting movie. Because I understand, I've watched things before, too, where I'm like, I don't like any of these people. And it's not necessarily about... I think that's where I think some of the split is. Like, I can watch a movie about mobsters. If you can make me care about your mobsters, I can ride along with you. You know, but if you just show me a show about just regular people, but they're just douchebag people, I'm not going to enjoy that movie. You know what I mean? Like, just I don't know. I'm not going to. If you can't get on board with the characters, you can't get on board with the movie. I get where you're at.
I'm not trying to like hate. I'm just trying to figure out why I don't like the movie. Because, like, there are some movies, like, it's not consistent, like, oh, I don't like this genre or this genre. It's just, like, you didn't do it for me. Sorry.
No, I get it. It's not, I don't think it's probably based on the idea. You said something about, like, you don't like these people because they're killers and they're mobsters, and that makes them unsympathetic. But, I mean, do you like any movies about criminals?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not that it's something about this just didn't connect with you. I'm not trying to like take it apart and go, you're wrong.
I think it's the way they show them.
That's
because like, I mean, this movie, I don't know. I never see Tom Hanks doing anything good. He just does okay things. He's okay at parenting when he's not being a psychopath.
No, I think that's the point, is that Tom Hanks is not good at being a dad. And he kind of knows that. I think that's the point of the conversation he has after he's been shot and they're on the farm and healing. Right. And the farmer's wife is telling him, like, your son really loves you. And he's like, he's never seen that. He's never really that's never really dawned on him that, oh, this is the reward for being a parent. Because
Right.
all he's known is that you feel like he does love Old Man Rooney, but it's more like he feels loyal to him. Like he has a loyalty. He gave me things, therefore, and he doesn't really quite understand that. He starts to understand it, and then they have that conversation at the table, like late at night, and he actually talks to his son. He goes, "What do you like? Like, what do you like?" And he's never had this conversation about what do you like in school, and like he's never really thought about his kids past. Peter's the sweet kid, and Michael's the troublemaker, and that bothered. That's where it hits home with me that like that's what the cycle is. He's afraid Michael is going to end up like him.
Right. I liked that aspect of it.
And that's sort of, I think that hammers home like Tom Hanks is not a good dad, and he knows he's not a good dad. And he's sort of the only way he knows to reconcile that is to keep Michael from following him down that path to hell. And I think that's what wins me over for Tom Hanks, because he's a killer. He's kind of a monster, and he's not like a good dad. He's not a good brother to Daniel Craig. He's not really a good son to Rooney. He's a good employee.
Yeah.
But when you realize he is trying to break the cycle, I think that's what wins me over for Tom Hanks and his character.
I guess it's interesting.
I think it is. If you don't find it interesting, I'm not telling you you're wrong. I mean, you are wrong. No, I'm just not going to tell you
the family dynamic of this movie is interesting, but like, okay, I want to compare it to something.
Go for it.
John Wick did it better.
Ooh.
That's my take.
When we started this podcast, I was planning out a series that I would do throughout this called Better Than John Wick. And this was going to be one of my flagship movies for John Wick did this revenge arc, but Road to Perdition did it so much better.
Unbelievable. Okay, so here's the thing. I think this is a better movie than John Wick. I think John Wick is a dumb action movie, but I think they did the family dynamics and the drama way better. With the there's a few things like
I will say they did it louder.
Okay.
I don't think they did it I don't think they did it better. I think they still did something interesting in John Wick with the family, with the brother and the the son.
It's really the same story.
That dynamic is, yes. It's less. I think Road to Perdition is less about the revenge and more about father and son dynamics. And John Wick was more about shooting people in the face.
Right. Yeah. But because he lost everything. He doesn't have a son anymore. He doesn't have anything to save.
Or a dog.
Or a dog, yeah.
That's right. Or a car. Man, he really did lose everything. Except that kick-ass house he lived in. 1%ers. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I totally interrupted you.
No, that was really the comparison there.
It's a fair comparison.
It's a stylized mobster movie that talks about family dynamics, and I think it does it in a more interesting way.
I will say the mythology aspect that John Wick puts in it is an interesting twist on it. I don't ever get the good family connection between John Wick and that old Russian mobster that you get between Paul Newman and Tom Hanks here. I buy that Tom Hanks is really pained to kill Paul Newman at the end of this movie. When he goes up to him, and Paul Newman says, "I'm glad it's you." I believe that Paul Newman is glad it's Michael coming to get him. And I believe that Michael is very sad to have to shoot his mentor and the guy who gave him everything.
Right.
And then took everything away from him.
There's more nuance there.
And I believe the troubled dynamic between Daniel Craig and Tom Hanks in this movie, which doesn't even exist in John Wick, because they don't even know each other before all that goes sideways.
There's no connection.
John Wick, I will say, a couple of John Wick action scenes are really cool. And probably better than the action scenes here. But the action scenes here, the hotel shootout in the accountant's room.
Yeah.
I love that scene. I love that whole sequence, the tension building up to it with the stock ticker drowning out the horn.
Crossing the street, all that. Yeah.
I think that is a masterfully done action scene and a sort of masterclass in building tension up to the shootout. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not stylized. It's not The Matrix. It's just a couple of guys trading shots, but I really like it.
It's good. I don't have complaints. It doesn't win me over. I'm sorry.
We appreciate very different things about movies, and I am taking that into consideration. I think part of the fun of this show that we do is finding like where our common ground is and where we are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, right. You could bring in Love, Simon, and you are going to enjoy that movie a lot more than I am. Just because a teen romance is probably not going to blow my skirt up. You know, like, it's not going to really...
I wouldn't subject you to Love, Simon. It's a mediocre movie.
No, I saw a few minutes of Love, Simon on TV a couple weeks ago, and I'm just sort of like, it's nothing you could tear down and go, well, this sucks. It's just like, this is a teenager movie. Like, this is a movie for people much younger than me. It's probably not going to connect with me in the same way. It's probably, but in the same way that you're coming at this movie going, this looks good. It's well written enough. I just can't put myself in the same position as these characters.
You know, I connect to Love, Simon because I'm gay. You connect to this movie because you're secretly a mobster.
I'm a brutal murderer. I thought you were going to say because you're a horrible father.
Well, we're on the podcast now.
I mean, well, you know, let's have it out. Hey, we're keeping it real.
Let's go on Dr. Phil to do that.
Let's not.
Let's get the money for it.
Let's get the free counseling at least.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the end of this movie when Tom Hanks gets shot.
That's, you know, the ending was the best part of this movie.
Because Michael got murdered.
Well, for one, I mean, when they showed up on the beach, I was like, he should be dead by now. Like the boy went running after the dog, and he was just there on the beach, and I was like, well, you're out of the picture, bud. Yeah. You've saved him. He can have a life. You're past the point.
Yeah, that is kind of it. But the real victory is that Michael Jr. couldn't pull the trigger.
Right, he didn't shoot him.
And so Michael Sr. dies knowing, oh, he's not like me. He's not going to go down the same path. And I want to talk about that in comparison to, and I don't remember the graphic novel super well, except for the broad strokes of it. And this is one of the things I do remember, is in the book, Michael Jr. does shoot him. He shoots the last hitman.
Right.
And then it shows him in adulthood and he's become a priest. That's his penance for. So in a way, it's like he breaks the cycle, but he still pulls the trigger. I like the movie ending, a lot better because it's better to have him not actually pull the trigger.
Yeah. The pulling the trigger is kind of like the catalyst for the cycle.
For going down.
How,
right.
How do you boil an entire arc down to one scene and then have the character make the wrong choice? And it's like, well, after that, after this tough situation, they managed to make it out.
It's one of those weird things. I don't know why they changed it for the movie. Except for that, I think this is just a better ending. But the graphic novel ending is just so like it's almost like a have your cake and eat it too. We want to show the kid killing somebody, but we also want to have him not go to hell for it, which is essentially what the movie's about. Is saving Michael from going to hell,
right?
As they believe will.
I do think the priest thing ties into the religious aspect of it.
Oh, for sure.
The story, like, it's kind of like a satisfying, like, oh, hey, like, we never got that in the movie. There's just a bunch of... It's just present. It doesn't tie into the story.
It's present, and it is sort of presented as the stakes of the movie. Like, Tom Hanks is he's worried not just that his son will go into a business that is dangerous, like his. He's worried that his son will go to hell. He's basically come to terms with the fact. And that's why I like that they make these guys, these sort of God-fearing Catholics, because it's easy to get into this when you're young. And then when you start getting older and knowing you're going to die and sort of, and I think that's sort of the arc they're showing them on. You know, Rooney's still going to mass and taking communion, and they go down to the church basement. By the way, there was nothing creepier than a old church basement. But they're talking about, like, we are going to hell. And, you know, basically Tom Hanks lays it out like Michael doesn't have to, you know, that's why he's trying to end this without Michael getting dragged into it. And so I think it's really great that the movie presents this as Michael can't pull the trigger. Michael's been saved. Basically. Mm-hmm. He's been shown this ugly world and he doesn't want to be a part of it. And I think that's a really good turn because Michael's a troublemaker. You know, he shoplifts. He steals shit all through the movie. He's taking shit.
We see what he's capable of.
Right. But... And that's Michael Sr.'s big fear for him.
What I'm more interested in is they never show that Michael Jr., like, he doesn't have any resentment for his dad. Like, I feel like the events of this movie, there should have been a lot more, especially he's a teenager. Like, as a 12-year-old, you'll hate your dad for anything. Much less if you see him killing people, and then those actions result in the death of the rest of your family. Like,
right.
Like, when he came home and his son was just at the table and then he goes up and sees the bodies, like that felt like the son was like, this is your fault, almost.
But they also get into the idea that Michael Jr. thinks it's his fault for having hidden in the car and witnessed that murder. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, they're coming at, they were coming after him. That's that great detail where Daniel Craig can't tell the Sullivan boys apart.
Right.
You know, and so he thinks he's killed Michael, where really he kills the wrong one. Peter.
Right.
And, no, I do think Michael Jr. had resentment for his dad because that's the whole thing when they're right up to where you said where the turn is at the diner, after the diner. You know, he basically, Tom Hanks gets in his face and is like, you start listening to me. And he gets angry, you know, because the whole time he's just kind of pouting in the car. You know, I'm not hungry. I don't want to eat. I don't want to do this. I don't want to put my head down when you don't, you know, and they finally start getting on the same page. And I think that's where they start to come towards the middle. They bond over the driving lesson.
Right, yeah.
Right after that, there's
it
a
doesn't
little
feel
bit,
like enough. Like, it's there.
It's not a warm and fuzzy family movie.
No, but
yeah.
like there should have been a bigger blow up. Like,
Yeah.
we as the audience are on the kid's side, and we watch all of these things. Like, you should be more mad about that. And then we get, like, a tiny little blow up in the cornfield, and then we're all good.
I don't know. I don't think everything was all good after that. But, I mean, there is like I think there's a resentment. There's a distance between Michael Jr. and Sr. And I think that's evident through the whole thing. So as opposed to having like an active resentment or an active hatred for his dad, he basically has an absentee dad. And if you ever talk to somebody with an absentee dad, sometimes there's a lot of hatred and animosity in there. And sometimes they're just passive. They're just like, yeah, I have a dad. I never saw him.
Well, my dad was absentee, and I would say that
for probably a short time. Yeah. But no, I think there's all kinds of dynamics. I don't know. I buy the distance between them, whether there was a big blow up or not. And I buy that there's a lot of guilt for Michael Jr. and for Michael Sr. And that they're, I really like the dynamic of Tom Hanks's character being a bad dad and trying to figure it out a little bit at a time. And, trying to figure out like, oh, my son's mad because I feel like maybe that was it in the cornfield. It dawns on him like, oh, he's angry because he thinks he caused this. I caused this. He basically has to tell Michael this wasn't your fault. You know what I mean?
right.
So I don't know. This movie isn't going to be salvaged for you by anything I say. I really appreciate this movie. I really think this is a beautiful looking movie, beginning to end. Yes, it does vary in how much it's stylized.
Mm-hmm. You do a good job of pointing out like the nuances that like
I've seen this movie a ton of times.
Yeah.
I own this movie because I just think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the really good mob movies because it's so much about other things other than crime.
I like the message, and it does an okay job of portraying it. I just not in a way
it's not
I want to see.
Yeah, it didn't click with you in the same way it does me.
Yeah.
And I think that is that's fine. Like your mom didn't want to watch this movie either because she's like, this is a downer movie. Like,
right, it is.
I get it. I get it. I'm not. You guys are totally wrong, but
Okay.
it's fat. No, it's totally cool. This movie is probably not for everybody. So I don't blame anybody for not getting on board with it.
This movie isn't even a downer enough to make you cry. Like there's not that release. It's just like, here's some depressing stuff. Okay, thanks.
I thought it was really sad when he did kill Paul Newman. I thought that was the saddest part of the movie. When Tom Hanks's character dies and the victory is that Michael Jr. doesn't pull the trigger. Well, I find that a very uplifting actual, like.
Well, that was a relief, yeah.
Right, that's the death in the movie where I'm like, victory, yes, way to go, Michael Jr. And then I like that he just drives himself back to he's like, well, my dog now, my car now.
Right.
I'm gonna go find my adopted family.
I have no family left. I guess I'll just meet these strangers.
No, that was the family that.
I know. Yeah.
He only went there because they had all the money.
They were the only people that he was nice to.
That he knew.
Yeah.
Well, they were a nice couple. Real quick, I just want to land on children and violence. There's something horrific about watching a child experience terrible violence or murder.
Almost like violence is bad.
Absolutely, but like I want you, and this was changed for the TV show, and I think they do this because they don't want to. It's so horrific they don't want to show it on TV But in the Walking Dead comic, at the end of the first trade, when Shane and Rick are squaring off in the woods, Shane is killed by Carl.
Yeah, Carl kills him.
Like, it is, and when the reveal of Carl being the gunman, this kid, it's horrifying.
That's kind of the opposite of this movie, because it's like, you're raising the kid up, you're teaching him not to shoot, this is a sign that he's better for the world. In The Walking Dead, it's Carl showing that he's man enough to survive in this apocalypse.
But the image of a kid shooting somebody else is still horrific.
Yes.
Killing somebody. Killing is like a big deal. Killing is never portrayed in this movie like, and I think that's where the graphic novel loses it, is you lose the impact of killing when you're just mowing down faceless henchmen. When it's actual people squaring up. But when Michael Jr. witnesses the murder, like, that's a horrific thing for a child to see.
It is.
And I think that is the thing that hangs over this movie for me as like, oh my, and when Tom Hanks tells his wife, like, Michael was hiding in the car when I went.
Yeah,
she's horrified.
She knows.
She's horrified at what he's seen. And Tom Hanks is like, don't worry, he won't say anything. Like, he's only worried about, like, he won't say anything.
We're good, it's fine.
And like, that's where you see the disconnect between the parent who is involved and cares and understands the children and the parent who's just a provider.
Right.
And, but I think that's one of like the horror movie elements to this movie is the fact that Michael Jr. witnessed a triple murder in the most, watch his dad machine gun these guys down is like, that's terrible.
I like the scene where he goes home and he finds his mom and brother and like, they don't even show the bodies.
Right.
It's just, he walks in, everything.
Right.
And it's
terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And when Michael Sr. gets home and you just hear him scream from upstairs.
Yeah.
Like it all plays out like a horror movie and it's so brilliant at setting that mood. I love it and I hate it. It's hard to watch at the same time.
See, I still don't feel bad for him. He finds his wife,
you don't feel bad for the wife and
I
Peter?
feel bad for the wife, yeah. I don't feel bad for him. He signed up for it.
That's true. I mean,
he led to that. That is his fault.
You're not supposed to feel bad for him, necessarily. But I think that is when he comes to understand, I think he comes to understand, and I like that the movie portrays this, too. Like, all of these things about loyalty and these family bonds and honor and all of these things that they talk about that Tom Hanks tells you he feels like Mr. Rooney gave us these things. So therefore I work for Mr. Rooney. Like, these things about loyalty, these things that he holds in very high esteem, he comes to understand the organization as a whole doesn't really care about any of those things because all they really care about is money. And it does show like the fallacy of like the idea that, I mean, you've heard that no honor among thieves. Like, I love when a movie really, these are where I think mob movies get, the ones that do it right, show you at the end of the day, these people aren't about anything except money and greed.
Who doesn't know that?
Of course they know that, but I'm saying there are movies that glorify the violence, that glorify that lifestyle. But the good movies, the good mob movies, really sort of make that point. Like, these people aren't about anything.
Well, that should be the point of mob movies. God, that is such a hard thing to say.
Why don't you bring the Hays Code back?
No, thank you.
But, I mean, when you see that dawns on Tom Hanks in this movie, like, that's through his eyes, he's sitting there saying, let me come work for you. All you have to do is let me murder this one person. And they're like, no, we can't disrupt the money. He
Right.
comes to understand it's not about what's right, what's wrong, getting justice, getting revenge, that it's all about money to these people. And so it just like, I think that's a great subtext that they put in this movie on top of the family dynamic that ultimately means nothing to them.
I think one thing I want to point out, so in the very beginning of the movie, they're at a wake, and
Yep.
Who's the old guy? Who?
Rooney. Paul Newman.
Rooney,
Playing
yeah.
Rooney,
He comes up to Michael, the kid, and he asks them to play dice or
Right.
whatever, and you can see Michael Sr. doesn't want that to happen.
Right.
Like, he is like, And at first I thought that was like, oh, because he told him off about the dice in the car.
I think that is why.
No, I think he knows that Rooney is bad for the kids.
I think he has kind of a sense of that, but also there is a thing about being undermined by your grandparent, the kid's grandparents. Like, hey, make sure you behave when we go to Grandma and Grandpa's house. And then you get there and Grandpa comes in and winds the kids up and
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I think I always feel like that's his whole thing is like, oh, Jesus, they're going to play dice. I made sure I told Michael not to bring the dice. And, I think it's a little way of showing, this is the family dynamic that exists. Tom Hanks doesn't have a dad except for Rooney. So Rooney's kind of a stand-in grandpa.
Right.
For their kids. I will say, last thing I'll say about this is Jennifer Jason Leigh is fantastic. And I just wish she had a little bit more to do. They didn't have to completely flesh her character out, but
the mom in this movie?
She was Tom Hanks' wife. She's great. And I'm like, man, you don't have to flesh out her entire backstory and everything, but, and the little bit that she did have, like when they're playing the piano together and she's sort of watching it and you can kind of see like she's seeing this sweet side of her husband and it's kind of this nice little thing, but it is such a throwaway part. I'm like,
I didn't even notice her.
It is kind of mind blowing that it's like they get Jennifer Jason Leigh, who's a named actress. She's really good. She's very respected.
She does have a name.
I mean, like, people know her, and it's just sort of like, and then she has this, I'm like, you could have got anybody to play this role, really. Like, it seems like,
but they can put her on the poster.
It could, I don't know if there's a lot of small parts in this movie that were played by, good, Stanley Tucci's role isn't huge. But yeah, it's just kind of a weird part that it's there, it's necessary, but she doesn't really, she's
you
barely
could have replaced her with like a dog that gets killed and then, the same thing.
No, it's not John Wick.
It is.
No, it's not. I don't.
The end fight scene is in the rain. Come on.
Well, this came way before.
Okay.
So, yeah, no John Wick.
All right. Sorry, Keanu Reeves.
You got anything else? I love Keanu Reeves. I love a couple of fight scenes in John Wick.
I don't know. I think I covered everything I had.
Well, okay, then I think we've beaten this one to death.
I will not be watching this movie again.
I will be watching this movie again, and I suggest everyone else does too. Don't listen to Austin. This movie's great.
All right. Well, we'll see on Twitter who agrees.
Ooh, hit us up. Let us know who's right, who's wrong. Road to Perdition. Good or boring?
We should make a poll.
I will.
One of those. Okay.
Oh, I will.
All right. It's happening.
Okay. We're closing this out. Look for our poll on Twitter. Austin.
Yes.
Who are you shouting out today?
Who am I shouting out? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I am shouting out
Someone doesn't have his show doc open.
Now I know what I'm shouting out. Sleeping at Last. It's a band. They've been around for a while. I actually don't know much about the history. I just like the songs. But
Okay.
it's essentially one person now. His other bandmates have left and he's doing solo stuff. But he does really experimental music. And one of my favorite things is Atlas. It's like this side project. He has a bunch of there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 12 different Atlas albums. And they all go over different things. There's space, land, oceans, life. And each one of the songs in these albums, it's like Jupiter, or it's like the Pacific Ocean, or there's even north, south, east, and west. And I don't know how he does it, but like the songs have nothing to do with the title, but also they have everything to do with the title. So it's like it perfectly captures how Jupiter feels, even though it's not just a song about this planet Jupiter. Like, it's also about like a son and a father, and like,
Okay.
in the lyrics, it kind of points to other things.
So like metaphor. Symbolism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like poetry.
Use your words. Yeah.
That's it. But yeah.
Cool.
I think it's really cool. So that's Sleeping at Last.
Sleeping at Last. Okay, and you got a Spotify link.
Yep.
I will put that in the show notes. That sounds ambitious and interesting.
It is. What do you have?
I am going to shout out a literary zine called Stanchion. That is Stanchion. This is a small, independently published magazine. It's published zine style by a guy named Jeff Bogle. I am shouting that out selfishly because I have something in issue 3. I have a short written piece called Facing West. But that's my bragging point. But seriously, there is, like any literary magazine, there is a lot of interesting pieces in there. It is widely varied what's in there. So some things you're going to connect with, some things you are not. But I would be very surprised if you flipped through an issue of this and didn't find something that you connected to.
I feel like it's like a tasting menu. Like,
Yeah.
you find people you wouldn't have otherwise known of.
There's essays, there's poetry, there's short stories and flash fiction, there's photography and art in there. It's a really interesting little zine, and it's independently produced. A lot of independent writers. Some of them, like me, this is my first paid published work. And I've seen a lot of people doing that. I follow them on Twitter, and they talked about, getting a lot of younger writers are submitting things. It's, so you're seeing a lot of new talent and, just judging based on what you're reading as opposed to, oh, I know this person. And it's kind of an interesting look into some writers that you otherwise wouldn't have seen. So if you
That's really cool.
It is cool. It's a fun little zine. I'm really happy that I have a piece in there and that I'm a part of it. And that is at stanchionzine.com. I will have that link in the show notes, and there you can pre-order upcoming issues. You can subscribe. I have a year subscription to it. It's really affordable. And leftover back issues that he has are still in the store, so you can order those. It's really affordable, and it's a cool little magazine if you're just looking for a great collection of short pieces to take a look at.
Nice.
On that note, we want to thank you for listening to this episode of The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. It helps our visibility, and it helps us grow the show.
Another way to help us grow is to tell a friend. If you have anyone who wants to travel around countries, occasionally murdering people, but mostly just spreading the word about really cool podcasts.
Robbing banks, eating at diners, getting to know the people.
That's right.
Tell them, as you're robbing that bank, tell that bank manager about our podcast.
Because that's what's important in that moment.
That's right. That's exactly right. And he's going to remember it.
Of course.
They're going to remember it. Next week, where are we going?
We are going, this is a joint pick.
That's
so
right.
I still get to pick the week after. Don't forget.
You have the next pick after we return to Republic City.
That's right.
And the Northern Air Temple.
My bugging has worn Dad off enough to worn him down, and
we're getting back to it. Korra season 3. I'm about halfway through right now.
Thoughts?
Yeah, just a preview of my thoughts. So far, I'm enjoying this far more than I enjoyed seasons 1 and 2. It is not without complaint at a couple of points, but honestly, like it seems to have turned a corner, or it's just worn me down, and I'm just accepting everything as it's coming.
I'll take it either way.
I'm happy to I dragged my feet jumping back in. I'm happy that I'm watching it now, and I'm looking forward to wrapping this season up and then getting on mic to talk with you about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to, I've been telling you, season 3. It's finally...
Yeah, you also told me season 1, season 2.
I did not tell you season 2.
Yeah.
No one said season 2 was good. Everyone in the world hates season 2 of Korra.
Season 2 made me not want to watch season 3.
Well,
but no, we'll see how this shakes out, and we'll see if they stick the landing on season 2. Plus Henry Rollins, so we got that in season 3.
All right.
So yeah, Austin, give us your social media.
Yeah. So I am austin.n.rood on TikTok, Austin N. Rood, and Old Who Review on Twitter.
Old Whoreview.
That's it. I'm just gonna stop putting my Instagram because I don't even really use it that much. So yeah, I have more social media, but
share whatever social media you want to share.
Those 3 are my primary.
All right.
So look me up.
I am going to shout out a very specific one. Instead of social media, I'm going to share this link. This is tinyurl.com/freerood. And I'm going to put that link in the show notes as well. I have a collection of comics and illustrated essays and short pieces that I've done over the years that I have put out for free as PDFs. And I've just collected those. I've thrown them in a Dropbox folder. And that's what the link is to. You can go to them. You can read them online. You can download them. You can take them with you, whatever you want. The audience for that is, some of it is very adult. Some of it is very much for kids. Preview everything before you give it to your kids. And also the quality is all over the place because I've done it at different times in my career. But it's all out there. It's for free. If you want to see what I do art-wise, writing-wise, and get a little sampling of it, there it is. I want people to take a look at it.
It's pretty cool. Very communist of you. We might have to run some background
communist.
Checks. You're just giving things out for free? Handouts?
It's charitable.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
There we go. Austin, you want to read the credits?
Yep. We did everything ourselves.
Well, there you have it. We'll see you next time on The Picture Show.
See ya.